organized by the BASL Member Networking Committee, chaired by Attorney at Law Hasinda Silva and co-chaired by Attorney at Law Himali Urugodavatta and convened by Attorney at Law Yohani Oharaja and Attorney at Law Matthew David. Today marks the beginning of an exciting new initiative that brings together our shared love for literature, books, ideas, and dialogue. The Lawyers' Book Club is envisioned as a monthly space where members of the legal profession, regardless of how busy we may be, can come together to explore literature across genres, exchange perspectives, and simply just enjoy the act of reading and reflection. Whether you read the book cover to cover or are hearing it for the first time today, this space is for all of you. It is an honor to have with us this afternoon our featured author, Attorney at Law, Chiranthi Rajapakse. Chiranthi is no stranger to excellence in literary craft. Her second collection of short stories, Keeping Time and Other Stories, was awarded the Gratiaen Prize in 2022, a prestigious recognition given annually for the best work of creative writing. Her first book, Names and Numbers, was also shortlisted for the same award in 2017, a remarkable feat for a debut collection. Beyond her literary achievements, Chiranthi wears many hats. She's a lawyer, a graduate in dental surgery, and holds a master's in human rights and democratization. She has worked as a legal researcher, a project manager, journalist, and continues to contribute to a number of very prominent publications. Her writing has been published by New Ceylon Writing, City, a quarterly journal of South Asian literature, Vachana, Samyukta Fiction, and Fairlight Shorts. She is also a part of the New Ink Forum and was recently awarded a Sangam House Writers' Residency, another prestigious accolade. As we move forward with this initiative, each session of the Lawyers' Book Club will revolve around this central theme, something that ties together the stories we read and the conversations that we have. This will help us reflect more deeply on the ideas explored in each book. The theme for today's session is Writing Fiction in Sri Lanka, Balancing Creativity and Reality, a fitting lens through which to explore Chiranthi Rajapakse's collection, Keeping Time and Other Stories, which delicately captures the quiet and often unseen layers of everyday life. To give you an idea of how today's proceedings would go on, we will begin with a brief introduction to her book, followed by a few selected readings by Chiranthi herself, a discussion with Chiranthi. Afterwards, we will open the floor for an interactive discussion where you're all invited to share your thoughts, questions, or simply impressions. We'll close with some reflections from the author and wrap up with a look ahead at what's next for the book club. With that, thank you once again for being here today and supporting this initiative. Let's make this an engaging and memorable session. Now, to officially mark the opening of this event, may I warmly invite the President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, Mr. Rajiv Amarasuriya, Attorney at Law, to address the gathering. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of you for joining this afternoon for a new initiative of the Bar Association. A book club, an opportunity to review acclaimed publications. I don't think in the last 50 years we have had initiatives such as this taking place, subject to correction of course, initiatives such as this taking place within the premises of the Bar Association. So I must take this opportunity to thank our very energetic new member networking committee for coming up with this, their first of many initiatives to take the BASL, the Bar Association, out to the members. the real owners and the real stakeholders of the Bar Association. This is this first initiative. So I must thank the chairman of the Member Networking Committee, very capable, competent treasurer, Mr. Pasindu Silva, the co-chairperson, Simali Orugudabatta, and the conveners, Matthew David and Yohani Yohoraja, for a lot of enthusiasm, commitment, and devotion to make this launch, which I think we will have every last Friday of the month, the Bar Association. The participants are not only those within this hall. It was decided a little while ago to open it out. So it is those who are also outside who have the opportunity through a virtual platform to join and participate. Of course, they won't be able to contribute, but participate in the discussion. As Francis Bacon, as we all know, said, reading maketh a full man, conference a ready man, and writing an exact man. The next two portions I had not really, I didn't thought it today, but reading maketh a full man. All of us are used to reading law books, at least the older generation. Younger ones now look at Google and whatever the support applications available. But as we know, those who are well read have a better command, of course, of the languages, but also have, I think, it widens your ability to think, maybe your imagination, and it makes, as Francis Bacon said, a full man and, of course, a full woman. So this is a good opportunity for us to come a little outside our traditional court work, legal work, spend a little time on a discussion on a important book, and of course we have the privilege of Chiranthi Rajapakse, joint winner of the Gratiaen Award, co-winner in 2022. So I think you're probably one of the most recognized writers, authors we have from the legal profession. So we are certainly proud about your achievement, and thank you for coming, supporting us, joining, and of course giving some support in setting up this idea, this concept. So whilst looking forward to a number of other initiatives from this Member Networking Committee, thank you once again, and I wish this initiative and today's, of course, book reading and book discussion the very best of success, and let us have more of these sessions as time goes by. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Let me now start off the session with a brief introduction of the book, Keeping Time and Other Stories. This collection of short stories focuses on moments in the lives of Sri Lankans, showing how they navigate their lives in a country that is often on the edge of crisis. A man worried about a job interview is tormented by a loudspeaker put up by the temple next door. A woman goes to the tailor to get a dress sewn for her daughter, but there is much more at stake than just clothes. A man who makes a living mending watches measures his life by routine. But his routine is thrown into confusion by a conflict of which he wants no part in. These stories offer glimpses into moments from their lives. I would now like to invite Attorney at Law Chiranthi Rajapakse to read a few chapters from the book Keeping Time and Other Stories.
Thank you, Katya, for the introduction, and thank you very much for inviting me to come and participate at this inaugural book club, which I think is a really great initiative. So I think just to start off with, like Katya said, so I'll be reading from my book. This is a collection of short stories. I'll probably just read a short extract from one story and another complete story called Blue, which is a short one. So I think I will just go straight into the reading and then we can have the discussion after. So the first one I'm going to read from, it's a short story called Merit, and this is the beginning of the story. So this basically starts with a man who is driving and he gets a phone call, which he's rather disturbed by, and that's how the story begins. Merit. Ajay's phone rang when he had almost reached home. He didn't know the number, but he picked up because these days he answered every number, hoping it would be that call. Yes, tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., definitely, I'll be there. He tried to sense from the voice what his chances were, but the voice was coolly impersonal, a middle manager, working his way through a dozen calls, dispensing interviews and hope like some minor god. It will go well. He told himself that every time. He had stopped opposite his house next to the temple. He was about to start the car, but then he changed his mind and got out. He glanced across the road to check that his wife wasn't in the garden and entered the temple through the massive gates. When they first moved to the neighborhood, this temple had been small and shabby, but a new priest had taken over a few years ago, and since then it had changed, growing more prosperous. Inside the grounds, he stopped, confused. Then he spotted the shrine room. There was an alms box in front of the Buddha statue. He dropped a coin in the box. He turned to leave, then hesitated, took out his wallet, extracted a 100-rupee note and put that in too, his lips moving silently. He left quietly, hoping his wife hadn't spotted him. He laughed at her for her habit of always visiting temples before any important event. A flag fluttered behind him at the temple entrance. Next to it, high up on the lamp post, was something new. Shaped like a fan, it loomed over the quiet neighborhood. But his back was turned, and he didn't see it. Chiranthi, he called as he entered the house. She was cutting patoli into fine slices, the dog curled up in a quiet ball at her feet. I've been called for a job interview tomorrow morning. The dog picked up her ears and wagged her tail, responding to the animation in his voice. That's really good. Now don't get excited, it's only the first interview. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. His thoughts jumped from one thing to another, as he did when he was stressed. The dog followed as he went to his room, without waiting for Chiranthi to answer. He knew she would have everything arranged. He took the black file from the cupboard. It had been a while since he went for an interview, and for a moment, he felt it all slipping away from him again. The dog nudged a cold nose against his knee. He remembered visiting the office a few years ago. It was an impersonal place of grey steel and silent escalators. It will go well, he told the dog. He felt the silence of the room. The metallic sound of static cut through the room. It grew louder and then stopped. He went to the pantry window. There's a loudspeaker put up. The temple is having a function tonight, didn't you see? Couldn't they have picked another night? Calm down, you get so excited over little things. It's a job, a little thing. Why are you always worrying about things that might happen? He watched as she took the curry off the fire and tipped it into the dish. She had finished everything calmly, on time, as she always did. Maybe it won't be so loud. How can a loudspeaker not be loud? He wanted to ask. This was one of the times when her unfailing optimism exasperated him. So I'm going to stop. That's one extract from that story. So I'm going to stop that. I just did a part of it, and for the second part, I'm just going to read another story from this collection. It's a very short piece called Blue, and I'll just read the complete one. And this story is set in March 2022 in Sri Lanka during the time of the economic crisis. So, blue, March 2022. A beautiful island with blue skies. That is how the tourist brochures describe it. When you live here, you don't look for the blue in the sky every morning. You look for grey, for blue tinged with the heaviness of cloud. You look for signs that the day will not be one of unlimiting, ceaseless sun, that it will not be a day perfect for sitting by the sea, but a dull, overcast day, good for walking in a place where waiting has become a part of life. You wake at 5 a.m. At that time, the power cuts haven't started yet. There is tea, but no milk powder. You use a wood fire now because you have run out of gas. You remember how the blue flame used to emerge when you switched on the gas cooker and how you took it for granted then. You are at the gas depot by 6. It hasn't even opened yet, but there are already people before you. You take your place in the queue with your empty blue gas cylinder before you on the ground and you unfold your umbrella. You forgot to bring water. As the day goes on and the sun climbs higher and higher, your clothes stick to your body, you wipe the sweat away again and again. But as the sun rises, even the umbrella cannot shield you any longer. There is no hiding from the sky. You can see one of your neighbors a few places ahead of you in the queue. Standing behind you is an old man with white hair, maybe around 70 years old. You wonder why he's there. Doesn't he have children to wait in the queue for him? Yesterday, an old man died after waiting several hours to get fuel. He was the third man to die that way. You don't know his name. It was announced on the news. The old man before you sighs and shifts from one foot to another. You glance back over your shoulder, hoping he's not going to collapse too. You don't want anyone dying here, not before you get your gas. A few weeks ago, the Prime Minister said there was no fuel shortage, the public was being misled. So the old man died in vain then. He killed himself. The day wears on, someone turns back for a moment and catches your eye. Her name is Ajanta, and she lives several houses away from you. In better times, you have exchanged food and recipes. You are glad to see her, though, even though you are too far away to talk. You don't lose a mobile phone, so you can't stare at your screen and scroll down endlessly, as your children do. The queue moves forward slowly. You can see Ajanta enter in the premises, and hope blooms inside you. A murmur runs through the waiting crowd, turning soon into a rumble of unease and anger. Gas Sivarai, gas is over, come tomorrow. You don't want to believe it. You stand there as the queue breaks apart into fragments, into angry knots of people. The old man sits down on the ground and rests his head on the empty gas tank as if he will never get up again. Someone takes your arm. It's Ajanta. It's a relief to have company in your anger. She slides something into your bag, a silver foil packet that crinkles, encased in a familiar blue covering. Milk powder. The supermarket got milk powder. It's all sold out. But the security guard there is my cousin sister's daughter. She kept some for me. Take one. She tells you all this in a whisper, as if she is giving you gold dust, which perhaps she is. You cannot divide a gas tank, but at least there is this. You find a three-wheeler to go home, one of the few that are not in a fuel queue. As the wheeler turns into your lane, you see the boys gather around the signboard, the blue signboard with the president's name on it. The signboard that was put up when the government came into power, many street names changing then, the name of the president and his family appearing, as if by magic, all over the country. The boys are pasting over the letters on the name board, replacing it with the old name for the lane. They're doing it silently but methodically, working together. Usually you would shout at them, "Hooligans, with whose permission are you doing that?" But today, you do not. You smile, just a little. In the city in front of the blue sky, sea, miles away, a young girl releases a paper kite. It circles the blue sky, dips and rises in the wind, its tail of blue and white tissue trailing behind. The words written on the kite blazing out for everyone to see. Gratiaen, go home. The words that started as a whisper a few weeks ago and have grown, gathering more and more people, fed by the impossibilities of trying to stay alive. If you look up, you might see the kite, but you cannot afford to look up. You have to go home, you have things to do before the power cut today, and tomorrow you have to wake up early again. Blue is the color of election posters, a red flower emerging from a blue sky. Blue for the color you used to mark every time elections came around. Capua play nil partai. If you cut me, my blood will be blue. Meanwhile, the kite moves in ever-widening circles, dancing and moving, drawing in more and more people like a tidal wave. A wave that will end where? No one knows. The kite moves across the island, this island of beautiful blue skies. Thank you.
Thank you, Chiranthi, for that lovely reading. It's always very special to hear from the author share their work firsthand. Now, let's dive into a conversation about the ideas that shape the book, your writing process, what inspired you, and get to know you a bit more about your journey. Can you tell us about how you got into writing? You have a very diverse background. You're a lawyer who has a degree in dental surgery, a master's in human rights, and experience as a researcher and a journalist. How did you pursue writing along with this? And what advice would you give to young professionals trying to do the same, especially with regards to managing time and expectations?
Oh, thank you for the question, Katya. And thank you everyone for being here. Okay, I'm not sure, okay. Well, they do say advice is kind of nostalgia. So, I mean, I can just draw on my experiences. So, how I got into writing, I think writing is something that I've always been doing. So, my background is slightly unconventional, yes. So, I actually first studied dental surgery. So, I worked actually, after leaving school, my first job before going to university, I worked as a journalist with Vijay newspapers. And I think that's how I got into maybe a discipline of writing every day. And that was really useful for me, I think. And then I did dental surgery and I worked for a while at Badula Hospital, actually, in government service. But I felt like I felt I didn't fit into that very much. So then I left and I worked as a feature writer and also at another NGO that is involved in human rights. And that's probably what led to my interest in law. And so I studied law while working as a communications person and doing other jobs. And I have also and after doing law, worked as a legal researcher. And I also worked with UNDP as a project coordinator for a while. So that's what I've been doing outwardly. Inwardly, while doing everything else, I've always been writing. So I think I was always writing things, and some of those things, short pieces, became stories. So this is my second collection. So I think how some of those stories, the pieces that I was writing became, like I have a lot of uncompleted things on my laptop, which I'm sure all writers have. So some of the things that became stories, I mean, I was writing for a while and then I realized I had about 10, 12 stories. And that is how I came to put together my first collection of stories called Names and Numbers. So I think writing is something that I've always been doing with other things. Yeah, I think the challenge is always time because it's always quite difficult to find time to write. So for me, what works is maybe writing every day and finding a time every day that you decide, okay, this is the time that I'm going to write and I'm not going to be doing anything else. But it really comes down to whether you want to do that, I think.
Thank you, Chiranthi. You've had a very interesting background and a lot of exposure to different fields. Just a follow-up question, how did you set about writing the stories in this collection? Did you first think of a plot and then write it? Could you walk us a little bit about the process, and are there any specific themes or topics that you find yourself drawn to explore in your writing?
I find it very difficult to come up with plots. I really wish I could, because there are some people who will plot like what's exactly happening in a story before they write it. I find that very hard. So usually what happens with me is I figure out where the story is going through the writing. And usually it starts with either maybe an incident or an emotion or maybe something. A lot of the time I think it starts with curiosity, with something you're curious about. And themes, I think you figure out, at least for me, you figure out the theme sometimes in hindsight. So, I mean, the first story, the story that I read out to you, Merit, so that's about, it's basically around this man, a man he's preparing for a job interview, and there is a loudspeaker going on all night at the temple next door. And he's stressed because this is something that he feels he can't protest about, but at the same time, it's quite making him anxious and he wants it to stop. So I suppose in a way that story does touch on not religion per se, but the institutions around religion, how we react to them. So it came out of an actual incident because there was something like that happened, but the man himself is fictional, and that his whole situation of the job interview and everything is made up. So it's kind of like, yeah, so it might start with something too, but then as you write, it becomes something else. And I think, so maybe, yeah, and same for themes. I think so another collection, the title story in this called Keeping Time, it's centered around the time of the Easter bombing. So it again touches on, I suppose, politics to a certain extent, communal tensions. But it starts with, it's about a man who makes a living mending watches. So I was just curious because I wanted to write about the life of somebody who had a different life from me, and who worked with his hands, because I work with words, and I suppose most lawyers do. Words are what we do. And I wanted to write about somebody who had an entirely different life, and who gained pleasure from working with his hands and doing something that is more, I don't know, in a different kind of skill. So you're trying to think what is it like to be in that other person's head. So that's the point that the story started with, and then it's set then it goes on to other things, because then the Easter bombings happen and his life is disrupted, and so it deals with other things. But that was maybe the starting point of the story.
All right.
I'm not sure I entirely answered the question, but yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Chiranthi. So it starts with an experience and you build the narrative around it.
Yeah, yes.
All right, that's very interesting. Do you find it challenging to switch between your legal mind and your literary or creative mind, or do the two influence each other in surprising ways? Do you think your legal background plays a role in storytelling?
So my legal background, as I mentioned briefly, so I think I've been mostly worked more in legal research and things. I've practiced only for a short time. So I think, but fiction, I think primarily is about communicating an emotion or a feeling. So it's a little strange because you're basically writing something on your own in a room, and you assume, at least you hope, that someone else in a room somewhere is going to read it somewhere. And if you have succeeded, it will communicate something, an emotion or some kind of feeling that you were trying to convey. So it's an emotional art form, I suppose, in that sense. Legal, I think, well, you would know better than me. Probably with legal work, it's more like you're building, it's facts and also analysis, and you're trying to build a persuasive argument, and maybe you're leaving emotion out of it. So the contrast between the two, in a way, for me, is kind of interesting. It's kind of nice when you're to be able to flip between the two, I think, yeah. But but the other thing is, I suppose, everything that you do feeds into what your experiences feed into what you write. So, and I think like most lawyers, I mean, I don't practice, so not so much myself, but you're constantly talking to people and you're targeting people's stories, maybe not with a different intention, but you're still getting stories from people, and that can also be material to, I mean, it feeds into what your experience and what you might write about if you want to write.
Thank you, Chiranthi. So you've received recognition for both your books. How do you handle feedback, both positive and critical, and how do you think it has shaped your writing?
So feedback, okay, that's an interesting one. Obviously, there's a part of you that would like everybody to say it's really wonderful and that's it. But yes, honestly, as a writer, I mean, usually I like to get feedback on everything I write. So usually the process is if I write something, and this I did before I got published also, I'll probably leave it aside for a while and then I go back to it after a bit and I try to read it as somebody who has not read it at all and try to figure out like what works, what doesn't, what seems interesting, would people get bored by this, like that. And then I would try to give it to a few people that whose opinion I trust, to kind of read it and give it, just tell me what do you think. And usually these are family members or friends who don't really have a choice on the matter. So that was how I got my first feedback. After like when I published my first collection of stories, Names and Numbers, then I got public feedback from an editor because I worked with Pereira and Publishers, and then they gave feedback, and that was really good. And also with the Gratiaen shortlisting, that first collection was shortlisted for the Gratiaen Prize. The judges also gave me some feedback, which was really useful. I think I try to remind myself of the positives, because one thing they said, which I really valued, was that the stories kind of reflected extraordinary qualities in ordinary people. So I've always treasured that. And Michelle de Cresta was one of the judges, and she gave me a lot of feedback, which helped me a lot. And she also gave some feedback when I was writing this second collection, Keeping Time. She gave me some feedback on this collection as well, which really helps. So I think it was, so when you're giving feedback, I think, well, obviously there's positives. I mean, people have to give you positives and negatives both. I think, well, at least with her, I think often the process was, at least with her, it was more like asking questions also. Like they might read a story and say, why did this particular character do this? Or I didn't understand. I might not understand if you don't understand the motivations of this particular character. So like this story Merit, I think in it, the first form, the one that I read out, I think the first version of it, it was just about a man and there was a loudspeaker being played next door, and then he gets annoyed by this and goes and complains. But the fact that he was going to face a job interview, that whole backstory came later, like that came in a later revision. Because I think, if I remember, it was Michelle who actually said, she said she couldn't quite understand the man's motivations. I think one thing she mentioned was to increase the tension in the story. So then I thought, why else might he be upset? What else might be going on in his life? And that was how that story got revised and developed more. So I think, yeah, for me, I like getting feedback, but I think it has to be somebody who kind of understands, gets what you're trying to do with the story, and and is able to communicate it effectively also. And I wish we had more avenues of getting feedback in Sri Lanka. It's quite difficult unless you're actually published or you have shortlisted, for something for the Gratiaen or something like that.
Thank you, Chiranthi. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of getting published? How did you go about it?
So that's okay. So this is my second collection that's published. So like I said, I was always writing, and I also used to go for things like writing workshops and things, just random things that I would find, because I wrote on my own, but I think it's quite difficult also if you don't have a community of, because I didn't know any other writers or any other people who actually wrote. I mean, I read a lot of books, but I didn't know the people who wrote the books. And I think Like say, even as lawyers, you have a community, you have colleagues. If you have, in the course of you work with other people senior to you, and also you have colleagues you can talk to. And in writing, that doesn't necessarily happen because you're writing in isolation. So I used to go for workshops and things. And I think to one workshop I met Amina Hussain, and then I showed her some of my stories, and she was very positive about it. So I gave them the collection, and they basically published it. So that happened that happened quite smoothly for me. It took about 2 years though for the whole book to come out, and that was shortlisted for the Gratiaen. It was shortlisted, and the second collection I submitted it as an unpublished manuscript for the Gratiaen Prize. And after it won, Saraswat Publishers immediately offered to publish it, which was really great. So that is how my two publications happened. So I think the Gratiaen Prize also helped a lot with the second one, especially because I think it's just a kind of reassurance for publishers also. I mean, it's easier to get. It helps It was also something I was really happy about the Gratiaen Prize. And also it also helped very much in this practical sense of getting the book published. And I also though before I published this collection, I also used to submit to journals, magazines, whatever I could find. There's a magazine called Channels by the English Writers Cooperative. And there's another one called New Ceylon Writing. So whatever magazines could find, I used to submit. And sometimes it got published, sometimes it didn't.
Thank you, Chiranthi, for sharing your experience. I'm sure that was very helpful for the audience as well. What's next for you? Any projects or ideas in the works?
Also set in 2022. So between that, sometimes I write short pieces. And other stuff, I also do a bit of nonfiction writing. I blog on Medium. And I've been doing a bit of travel writing recently, which is something that I've also been enjoying.
Yes, that will be a very interesting addition to your collection. Thank you, Chiranthi, for those very insightful responses. We'd now like to open the floor to the audience for an interactive session. This is your chance to ask questions, share thoughts, or even reflect on a story or a theme that spoke to you personally. The theme for today's session is writing fiction in Sri Lanka, balancing creativity and reality. Would anyone like to share any thoughts or stories relating to the theme?
Only I listened to your story. The story about the loudspeaker, it's I very much connected to that because when I was very small, I loved the noise coming from the loudspeaker, the songs, but as the loud very disturbing for me while I was sitting for my papers. So the day before my papers and the day when the morning loudspeakers is very disturbing. I really connected to that story. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's probably a common experience. And maybe they are similar to you. It was something that, it started something that I actually did have to suffer through a loudspeaker. So that was the emotion that was channeled into that story. So the story, the man in the story doesn't exist. That's the place where it started from.
Another thing about the book is that we all could relate to it a lot because it's based on Sri Lankan stories, based on experiences we've all had. So would anyone like to share a thought or a theme that spoke to you or an experience you've had that's quite similar to this?
Hi, Chiranthi. Good read again. Thank you for the BASL as well for organizing this. Otherwise, I wouldn't have read the stories. My question to you is based on now Now, you are writing about the ordinary Sri Lankan people, that trying to take out the extraordinary qualities in them, which is amazing, as well as touching. But my question is now, day-to-day life of the ordinary people, they speak the language, which is the frequently used language is Sinhala or Tamil. But in your case, might be Sinhala, the community of people that you interact with day-to-day life. Most of the writers in Sri Lanka, or most of the writers, they either prefer writing in 100% English or Sinhala. But I have read through your stories, and you have embedded some Sinhala words, colloquial words here and there, which quite put a personal touch, because that's your language that we use. So how do you go about it? Because if you embed some Sinhala words, that might if you embed too many Sinhala words, that might dissuade especially English reading public or the crowd from reading the book. But if you embed certain Sinhala words, it might give a personal touch to especially the Sri Lankan crowd. So how do you go about that?
Thank you. That was quite a thoughtful question. Thank you for that. Yeah. Yes, that is, I mean, yes, because like even in the story that I read, there is one phrase that's in Sinhala. So generally how it happens is, if I'm writing, as you say, most of the time we'll be talking in Sinhala, but if you're writing the story in English, then you have to translate the dialogue in your head and write it. And usually it's quite difficult to get the nuances of a conversation, because you might use expressions in Sinhala which you can't translate. And also, depending on who you're speaking to, you might use different words in Sinhala. You will talk in a different way to your friend, and a different way, say, to your parents or to your manager or your boss. And often in English, it's quite difficult to capture those nuances, because then I think we are more maybe hierarchical in Sinhala, because even the word for brother and sister, we only, I mean, the common words you use of elder, we denote whether it's elder brother or sister, unlike in English where it's a neutral term. So that's probably reflective of our culture and our, basically us. So it can be quite difficult translating that. So sometimes when I'm writing, I find that I write the conversation in Sinhala and translate it later. Or so usually most of the time I translate it in English. Sometimes when I can't capture the nuance of the phrase, I try to keep it in Sinhala. Like in that story Blue, where he thinks Lake Apuot Nil Patai, there's no really, it's very difficult to translate that into English without sounding like it sounds strange. So yeah, I do that because, and well, to be honest, because these books are published in Sri Lanka, it hasn't been much of an issue, I think. I don't know whether if it has been published over in another country, whether a publisher then might say, okay, you can't keep this, you have to take it out. It didn't, so both my books have been with Sarasavi and Pereira Hussein, so it's like a Sri Lankan market. So maybe for that reason, I mean, I use some Sinhala phrases, but I try to figure out like, I'll try to see whether you don't like even if you don't understand the Sinhala phrase, you should be able to understand what that passage is conveying. It might convey something extra to somebody who understands the Sinhala phrase, but even if you don't understand it, I feel you should be able to get the gist of the story. If that's the case, then I just leave it in. Yeah. But that's a good question.
Thank you, Chiranthi. And I noticed that you've also mentioned the meaning of the phrase in brackets also most of the time. It's very interesting. Does anyone else have any thoughts or questions to share with us?
First of all, I need to say that one reason I really like your book is like you find one of the elements in each story, right? In each story, you can relate, and surely before reading this book, I was reading selected stories by Rabindranath Tagore. And then there they use Hindi phrases. So I used to think what difference could it make until I started reading this book. So whenever I see a single phrase, it's an expression, right? So that adds emotions to the story. So I really like that element of it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Chiranthi. It's just a general question. I don't know whether it will align with the theme that we have. Maybe it's a continuation from Rahubada's question. The question is, what's the switch from a reader to writer? Because as lawyers, we all do read, even me being a book enthusiast. What is the switch that because as you say, and your books that we read, it talks about the real-time situations and the real-time problems that we face. Even we do, even in my mind, I do. Even from here, when I'm going home, I see a lot of things and I imagine a lot of things. But when I want to put it into words, or when I want to, the way it is articulated, it's a bit difficult, and that's a bar for me that I feel. And me, being a big book enthusiast, I want to have that switch from reading to be a writer. And I've also tried. So what could be that advice or piece of, how did you start? How would you say that this was the switch for me? Is there a situation like that? So if you share that, it could be helpful for us.
Oh. Okay. So I think all writers start by being readers. So you're starting from the right place. Everybody who writes, I think, starts as a reader, or because there's a book that you read that you wish you could write. So I think that is always the starting place. The switch, as far as I can remember, I've always been writing. But for me, I think it started with, people start in different ways with journal writing. I tend to keep, I'm not a daily journal person, but I do keep a journal. And some of these things just started as descriptions of things that happened every day. And this, which later turned into stories, because I think even Blue is very much started with a description of, it was also a way of trying to capture the particular feeling of a particular very chaotic time basically in our lives. So I think a lot of that started as diary entries, like descriptions. And then some of these things got developed further into stories. But it's kind of difficult for me also to identify why particular things became stories and some didn't. But sometimes external things help also, I used to go for writing workshops, like I mentioned. And sometimes I was part of a couple of writers groups, where sometimes you would do things like giving a prompt, like you give a prompt or give a suggested prompt. One prompt was an unfinished drink, I remember. And then you try to write a story about around that particular prompt. And that actually became a story that's in my first collection. So sometimes I think, it is two things. I think journaling gives you practice in writing. And I think a lot of writing is just practice also. You write and then something seems to work. Yes, I'm not sure whether that, entirely answers your question, but that was how it happened, I think, for me.
Usually, this is not the kind of books that I read. I'm usually stick to classics such as Dickens or Austen. So it's very different. For me, this was like I was standing in a busy street and eavesdropping on a cacophony of thoughts. And as the person just walks away, it would abruptly stop. So that's my question to you. Reading, especially the RJ's interview story, a natural conclusion would have been to carry the story forward to his interview, or where the story about the doctor who lives next door, the kids, a natural conclusion would have been to carry it a bit forward and talk about how the doctor might have ingratiated himself into that family, or when the kid goes abroad, how his aunt actually lives and how those two lives would mesh. So I want to know whether you stopped your story at that particular juncture just for literary effect, or was there any reason that you did not want to continue it, so that there might be a little bit of closure or a bit of end as to that particular story?
Okay, that's an interesting question. And thank you for the close reading of the stories. I think I just felt like Generally, I'm drawn to stories where you have a little bit of ambivalence in the ending, where it's not entirely spelled out exactly how things might play out for these people, but you have some kind of, there is some kind of conclusion. So it's probably that I just felt that I didn't need to spell it out any further beyond that point. Yeah, so I think maybe in that Man Next Door, the story that you were referring to, I think it ends at the point where the child realizes that her family is, that the doctor next door is not going to fit the role of the father that she had been imagining him as. And it ends with that realization. So I felt, in my mind, it felt like that was the stopping point for the story. And similarly with the one about the aunt, where he realizes maybe that he didn't really actually know his aunt as well as he thought he did. So yeah, I felt in my mind that there had been some sort of arc that the first character had completed, but I think I also like leaving a little bit of ambivalence, a little bit of, it's up to the reader to imagine what else might happen in those people's lives.
If anyone else has any questions to ask, we have a bit more time.
I'm Sahfi. Have you ever written a story based on a courtroom experience? And what extent or how much your profession as a lawyer influence your work or inspire your works?
Okay, that's a good question. I think probably not directly. I don't think I've written anything like that. So also to say, like, I practiced only for a short time, and then after that, mostly I've been working as my current job. I'm working as a it's more legal research, because I did my law degree. Yes, at that point I was working, and then I worked a lot in the research and the development sector. I think I did start one story actually that was set, not exactly a courtroom setting, where it was set in, but around the Halsdorf area. I was trying to capture not a court case as such, but the feeling of the place, which is, I mean, itself is quite a different universe. Like the whole atmosphere of the, the busyness of the place, the people coming and going, and that sense of kind of slight bewilderment, or so if you don't understand what's happening, because it's like, if you are not a lawyer, actually courtrooms are very confusing and complicated places. And it can, even legal jargon can be very complicated and confusing. So I did try to write a story like that. It was, I don't think I completed it. Don't know whether I might ever go back to it. Yeah, but yes. So not directly so much, but yes. Maybe the experience of everybody I've met through the course of my work, different workplaces, yes, that's probably definitely affected how I write.
Thank you, Chiranthi. Does anyone else have any questions to ask? Thank you, Chiranthi, for those very insightful responses, and thank you to the audience as well for asking very interesting questions. Before we wrap up, as the Lawyers Book Club is a collective space, we welcome your suggestions for books to feature in our next session. If there's a book you'd like us to read and discuss at the upcoming meeting, please write the name of the book in the book recommendation list that you can find on your way out, or fill out the Google form that will be shared with you via WhatsApp. If there is anyone here who has not registered with the book club yet, please fill your names and details on the registration book on your way out so that you would receive updates about our sessions. If you're also interested in purchasing the book, copies are available for purchase today, and we look forward to your recommendations. I now invite the chairman of the BASL Member Networking Committee, Attorney at Law, Pasinda Silva, to deliver a token of appreciation to Attorney at Law Chiranthi Rajapakse.
And okay, thank you very much for having me here and inviting me as your guest on this first book club. I really appreciate that. And
thank you so much for joining us. I now invite the chairman of the BASL Member Networking Committee, Attorney at Law Pasinda Silva, to conclude the inaugural session of the BASL Book Reading and Lawyers Book Club. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Katya. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So just as our president said that reading maketh a full man, which means that reading provides knowledge and broadens one's intellect, making a person very rounded and insightful. Now, another aspect that runs parallelly with that is writing. So it is said that a story is a metaphor for life, and life is lived in time. So I think today is a very significant day where we have gathered for the BASL book reading and the Lawyers Book Club launching day. So this has been a very innovative idea of our president, Mr. Rajapakse, and together with our very able conveners, Yohani Yoharaja and Matthew David, assisted by our co-chairperson, Ms. Himari Urgudavatta. So I hope that this particular initiative will develop to great lengths, and as we move on, it will move to very broader perspectives. So once again, I would like to thank Chiranthi, who is a very ardent supporter of BSL, and with her knowledge, sharing with us the knowledge and experience in her work, and also Katya, who has been very instrumental to make this book launching effort and the reading club to be a successful event and perspective for our members. So let us be intact. Matthew and Yohani will share the information as we move forward, and hopefully we'll go from strength to strength. Thank you very much.